questions as much as I've been today. And thank you so much, Heather Home, for that wonderful presentation. I'm like even more excited to get out in the field this season and really admire all the native pollinators and bees that are out there and seeing where they're all hiding. So this is the last session before our lunch break and expo, which you can find on the Zoom events lobby panel. From there, you'll have the opportunity to really network, talk with each other, along with our lovely speakers. I will say, once you're in there, you're going to want to zoom in so you can really see, people's photos, and then you can see everyone that's really around you. And then, yeah, you can talk to our speakers and our incredible sponsors. And as well, you'll have the opportunity to look at all of these really cool posters that we have for you. Before that, our 7 poster presenters will give a 3-minute pitch of their projects, their research, and alongside their pitch, they'll have a picture that represents what their poster work is on. Yeah, so we have really cool topics that really highlight the ethos of this symposium: resilience, looking forward into our landscapes. We have posters on terrestrial and aquatic species, management, and community engagement. And I'll give a brief intro for each of our speakers as follows. First, we have Ashley Morris, who today is a Stony Brook PhD student, followed by Fate Saiwang Nguyen, a graduate research assistant from the New York State DEC and SUNY ESF. After that, Chris Smith, a biologist from the town of Hempstead, followed by Dr. Steve Pearson from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, then Amanda Furcal, a landscape ecologist from the Sisters of St. Joseph, Emily Hall, the conservation policy advocate at CTUC, and lastly, Ashley Crespo from Nelson Pope, and Aidan Ackerman, assistant professor of landscape architecture at SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry. And with that, each of our presenters have 3 minutes. And once I click to the next slide, the next presenter will start. And so I hope you all enjoy it. And with that, Ashley Morris, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Hi. So this not very exciting picture representing my work here is showing what us at the DEC, so I also work for the DEC as well as being a PhD student, have picked up through an observational study that encompasses 10 years of vegetation survey work. It's a little over a decade now of vegetation survey work that was initially started to track the invasive species hydrilla when it was first recorded as being present in Lake Ronkonkoma on Long Island. We have been able to track the growth of hydrilla, but something that is very interestingly started to happen is we also picked up the introduction of Eurasian water milfoil into the lake as well. And what we're beginning to see is these 2 species interact in ways that haven't been overly recorded in their expanded range. So we're starting to see these species compete with one another. And despite hydrilla's billing as one of the more aggressive invasive species, what we're actually starting to see is Eurasian water milfoil being able to outcompete and become the dominant invasive species in Lake Ronkonkoma. This is something that we're going to continue to monitor in the lake through increased surveys. So you can see that the picture that I have up on here shows the survey points we have so far. We're going to add an additional inside circle of survey points because while the lake is very deep, in the middle, we feel like maybe this isn't encompassing the entire community. So we're going to add an inside circle now of survey points to continue to track this really interesting interaction between 2 invasive species instead of seeing what's going on with the native community. We really are going to try to focus on understanding how invasive species are interacting with each other. That's what I did. Check out my poster. It's got cool graphs.
All right.
Hi, everyone. My name is Fate Saiwang Nguyen. I'm a master's student at SUNY ESF, and I'm also working with Jennifer Dean from Natural Heritage and Dylan Perry from SUNY ESF as well. We're in the middle of this cool new project to gather invasive species post-treatment data from all across the state. Now, this data, whether it be for herbicide treatments, biocontrol, mechanical treatments, it's really critical for evaluating the effectiveness of management interventions, especially when we're looking at these bigger scales and long periods of time. But for a variety of reasons, this data often goes uncollected, unreported, or unprocessed, usually due to lack of funding or time. And even when this data is collected, the lack of standardization makes it pretty difficult to share, compare, and evaluate that data. You know, in New York in particular, we have this huge network of partners doing countless hours of work on hundreds of different species, but there's really no easy way to evaluate the outcomes of that work. So the data from this work that's been happening, you know, for decades represents this relatively untapped source of knowledge on landscape scale treatment effectiveness. So to overcome these issues, we're working collaboratively with partners from across the state to centralize all the data that's out there and put it into IMAP invasives. IMAP is the state's central database for invasive species, if you don't know. And we're going to try to standardize future collection by taking the data we get and feedback from partners and use it to develop a sort of streamlined data collection app. And that's going to be piloted in the field this summer. We're then going to take past data and the data we get from the new app to identify successes and challenges across the management landscape, and really try to explore the underlying factors that are driving management effectiveness. These data and analyses are going to be made accessible and hopefully easy to read in a newly developed web map, which should make it so that managers can better communicate about their work to stakeholders and funders. The last thing is we're always looking for more data on post-treatment stuff you did, probably some of the cool work these people will be talking about. So if you have any data like that or information, feel free to come find me at the poster session or contact me later, and I'll look forward to working with you. Thanks.
On everybody. The Building Communities Through Sustainable Living program was established back in 2018 with grant funding from the Nassau County Soil and Water Conservation District in an effort to allow the town to collect, propagate, and distribute native plants while providing an educational environment for sustainable horticulture practices. The funding also allowed us to renovate an existing greenhouse on the town's property at Point Lookout, and purchase the necessary equipment to propagate a wide variety of native plants. So since then, we've been able to accomplish a number of program goals through different partnerships. For example, our partnership with the Friends of the Hempstead Plains has allowed us to collect native seed in an effort to propagate species exhibiting Long Island ecotypes. And in recent years, we've been able to propagate a number of native grass species, including little blue stem Indian grass and broom sedge. And the propagation efforts have allowed us to give back around 400 native grass plugs to the plains for planting projects. We've also been able to use saltwater hydroponic systems in the greenhouse to grow marsh grasses, using seed that was collected from our marshes around the Oceanside Marine Nature Study area, and allowing us to continue to propagate and keep some of these plants to work with different organizations for different planting projects in marshes. We've also been able to collect seed and grow plants for our Lido Beach Passive Nature Preserve, and having the species on hand has allowed us to remove invasive species in planting areas and replace them with native species that are found throughout the preserve. Another aspect of the program is also the development of life skills and sustainable horticulture practices through a partnership with Camp Anchor and the Kiwanis Action Club, where students help maintain the garden boxes at the town's clean energy park while learning about sustainable gardening practices, and all the resulting produce is then donated to the Long Beach Soup Kitchen. And our future projects and current projects are right now working on propagating more native pollinator species in accordance with the Mayor's Monarch Pledge, which the town has just signed. And we'll be installing pollinator and rain gardens using native pollinator species.
All right, well, welcome everyone. It's a great conference so far. So our poster is detailing a pilot treatment and provides some details on a long-term control project of the aquatic invasive plant Lorigia pepoides, as well as European frogbit in the Peconic River in Suffolk County. Ludwigia has been present in the Peconic River since 2003, and hand pulling has not been sufficient to control the spread or growth of these populations. So in 2021, in a approximately 1 acre section of the river, the New York State DEC performed a pilot treatment of Ludwigia and European frogbit to assess the efficacy of a treatment plan using 2 different herbicides. The results from the field season indicated that the herbicide combination would be effective at controlling both of these plants, Ludwigia and European frogbit, and that in combination, it would not result in the European frogbit replacing Ludwigia throughout the treatment area. So please come by my poster and we can discuss this in more detail. Thank you.
Okay, hey everyone, I'm Amanda Furcall. I'm the landscape ecologist at the Sisters of St. Joseph, managing a 200-acre campus there. Open to the public, please come visit us. It's a mixed-use property, and I want to talk about this forest. It's 37 acres of a pitch pine, pine barrens, oak forest, and like a lot of forests on Long Island, it has a long history of unnatural disturbance. Landscape dumping is really the primary issue that had happened in the past. And even though this is a fire-dependent ecosystem, it hasn't burned in over 100 years. So of course, the Sisters of St. Joseph want to steward their land well and do restoration work. And as we all know, the first part of that is getting a baseline, figuring out what you have. So over this past summer, we did these 22 plots based on the National Forest Inventory analysis to get an idea of what the forest composition is. Getting an idea of the age of the trees, the species which are dominant, how their health is, and also looking at the vegetation. As you can see from this, the bright green is pitch pine, so we have lots of pitch pine, but 14% of the standing biomass is dead pitch pines. Part of that is southern pine beetle, and part of that is just the trees are aging out, and our leaf litter is building up from the lack of fire. We looked at the vegetation, lots of poison ivy, lots of smilax, getting that edge effect, and then also English ivy and T. viburnum, which we are starting to manage. We also have a very high basal area. And so the idea of doing this was get an idea of the baseline, and we developed a simplified survey to move forward in the future, do more plots, get a more granular idea of how the forest looks, because different patches are very different. So take a look at my booth if you want to talk about how to do stewardship here, if you have ideas to help me with thinning, burning, or if you're looking at your own ecosystem and saying it looks a little bit like this. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Hall, and I'm a conservation policy advocate at SeaTuck Environmental Association. I'm really excited to be with you all and chat a little more today about Westbrook and the natural and kind of beautiful rewilding that's going on at the site. So rewilding is kind of known as a conservation technique by which you basically let nature take its course in some way while restoring some of the characteristics of the habitat that have been degraded over time. A dam at Westbrook failed in 2019 and allowed the stream to flow freely for the first time in over 100 years. We at SeaTuck with our partners have been carefully monitoring the physical, botanical, and biological evolution of the site while trying to protect it from emerging invasive species like Phragmites. We're actually having a volunteer Phragmites pull April 22nd. So if you're interested in that and joining us at this site, please feel free to get in touch with me, as well as join me at the Westbrook booth. And I'd be happy to talk to you more about the rewilding taking place at this site. Thanks.
All right, hi everyone. This project may be a little different than what's been presented before, but we are presenting our work on the Flight 93 National Memorial, in which we were tasked with trying to understand future management conditions for the memorial groves. And in order to do that, we chose a program called The Grove to virtually grow these varied health condition trees over the course of a 30-year period. And so the idea was to take existing conditions. For those who don't know, the Flight 93 National Memorial was on a reclaimed coal mine. So they are in varying health conditions, most of them in poor to degrading aspects, and try to replicate that using this program. I think Aiden will take over the second half of this presentation.
Yeah, so we're working with the National Park Service to try to come up with a treatment plan and management plan for these species over 25 years. And so we're tasked with trying to figure out certain practices that will have the potential to dramatically impact the character of these groves. Things like, simple things like studying tree mortality, as well as tree management, pruning, and even species replacement. A lot of the species that were selected for this site were because of fall color, not necessarily their fitness for the soil conditions and other conditions. So, now looking at a second wave of planting and test plots that are exploring more native species, species that are tolerant to degraded soils, compaction and stuff like that. So what this software can do, as we're showing here on our poster, is essentially simulate the growth of a single tree or a group of trees with things that you otherwise can't really do with visualization software, such as competing for light, different branching structure. We have real control over every single aspect of these. So Ashley worked for like almost 2 years developing tree models to replicate the actual conditions on the site, and sort of forecasting visually like a crystal ball what would happen over the 25-year management plan. And then, simulating certain impacts to the grove, like, again, removing certain trees to understand the visual impact. What we're looking for here is landscape character. And we haven't really seen a tool yet that lets us do this in the way that the grove does. And then a little piece of the last part of the project is, this looks very much like digital software, but we've gone all the way to using video game software to put these trees in a context that looks a lot more like the landscape character of the site, light, shadow, context, vegetation, terrains, even looking at mowing patterns. And so, yeah, we're happy to share a little bit more about our process and the outcomes and the ongoing project in our poster session.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for those really interesting and well thought out posters.